nowadays, if you have a treatment center website, everybody seems to be saying the same things: individualized treatment plans, evidence-based therapies. And we think that this is differentiation, but is it really? That's what we're talking about today. Our topic is how to differentiate yourself in behavioral health. And we have the best guest for you, Jen Carvalho. She's the CEO of The Haven at College, one of the few organizations focused exclusively on providing outpatient mental health and substance use care for college students. And she's got over 20 years of behavioral health experience, executive experience, including roles at Discovery Behavioral Health, Acadia Healthcare, and Your Behavioral Health. Jen brings a unique blend of operational excellence, team building savvy, and deep personal insight as someone who's in long-term recovery herself. And what sets Jen apart? That's why we're so excited to have her on. It's her unwavering focus on authentic differentiation in an industry that often leans on surface level marketing. She's going to talk about what really makes a treatment center stand out and how to close the gap between what we say and what we deliver. And also why leadership, mentorship, and clinical integrity aren't just buzzwords, they are your brand. If you work in behavioral health, whether you're running a team, building a brand, or both, this is a conversation you do not want to miss. Jen, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Aw, thanks for having me. What a great experience. I'm really honored to be here.
What do you think most treatment centers get wrong when it comes to trying to stand out in the industry?
It's a great question. I think when you're trying to stand out, you're all about the external as opposed to the internal. And what I've found has been that the more authentic, the more focused, the more vision-driven we are internally, the more we stand out externally. So rather than focusing on the external marketing approach, I think it's really important for us to focus on getting the clinical perspective correct, making sure that our clinical philosophy runs deep and throughout the entire organization. All the things that we can do internally with our team and staying true to our mission and values that make us stand out is really where we should be focused.
So you mentioned external versus internal. What does that look like? What are some examples of ways people focus on external things? And then maybe give us an example of what it looks like when you focus on internal things.
Sure. I see a lot of really shiny websites these days. I meet a lot of people who are in the marketing industry who have a really slick pitch for me, and they want to talk about how beautiful their facilities are, how they have, executive level care or some sort of very lush surrounding for a client to get treatment in. And that's amazing. And I appreciate that. However, what really creates differentiation and what is really valuable to a client who's seeking a change in their life is what you can offer in the treatment setting. And so is that deep clinical passion? Is that differentiated clinical philosophy? Do you have highly credentialed individuals who are providing that care? Do you have some sort of differentiated treatment identity that really meets the needs of the client who's seeking the care? Having a beautiful facility is wonderful, but that's not what's going to get a human being well.
Yeah. And I also feel like if I have pictures on my website, the pictures are kind of going to tell that story of the surrounding, the environment, the rooms, the facility. But what it can't tell in a picture is our clinical approach, the way that we show up, the things that we're focusing on. And if we're honest, when we're coming in for addiction or mental health treatment, that's why we're there in the first place. Yes, all of those other things are helpful. They can make things like withdrawal feel less terrible and scary, or they can make you feel more or less calm depending on the environment, but it's not going to be the deciding factor in where you go to get treatment. So can you explain the difference between true clinical differentiation and then just using those amenities as selling points? Like when you say clinical differentiation, what does that actually mean?
Sure. I look at the clinical team makeup. So I want to know that people are credentialed, that they have experience in this industry, that they also have a personal passion. And that doesn't mean that they need to be in recovery themselves. It just means that they bring their whole heart and soul to the table when they're working with a client. I want to know that they're educated on both our traditional and emerging modalities of care. I want to make sure that we're on the cutting edge and doing everything possible to make sure that clients have a healing experience, a truly healing experience. I am looking for teams that work together in unison, meaning that we have interdepartmental communication that is working to the benefit of the client. So that's medical speaking with clinical, it's clinical working with admissions, it's admissions working with outreach to make sure that everyone is communicating the best possible path for a client.
So this makes me think about how many treatment center websites I've seen in which they do not list the providers of the care. They don't put their pictures, they don't put their names, they don't put their credentials, and then a lot of them don't put their bio and expertise as well, right? Why would you not want to know who's going to be treating you? Why would you not want to know all of the people who are going to be delivering care? Especially if you're going to a treatment center for a specific reason. And I think a lot of treatment centers don't do this because it means that they need to have website upkeep. Unfortunately, in the behavioral health field, we know that turnover can be consistent. People swap and go around to different places a lot. How do you help communicate that when you're working with the Haven? How do you tell those stories of the clinicians who are working with your staff to people who are coming to the Haven?
You know, it's really interesting that you bring this up. I was just watching Meg Key's podcast that she did with you guys a little while ago, and she spoke to this very issue of why do we not put full CVs on our website of our therapists and clinicians, even our frontline staff who are super committed to the care that our clients receive. And you're right. I think it's because it takes a fair amount of resources to make sure that we've got our website constantly updated. When we have turnover, 30 to 40% in our industry, which we do, it makes it really difficult to stay on top of that. However, our team is our number one resource. They are defining our culture. They are presenting the treatment modalities in a way that are going to engender engagement in long-term recovery. They're the ones who are actually helping promote the healing in another human being. And so we should be elevating them. We should be honoring them. And we should be sharing with a potential client all that they need to know when they're making a decision about where to choose to go to treatment.
You mentioned that statistic of turnover. What was that again?
35 to 40%. Honest to goodness, those are the industry standards. I've seen it go much higher than that.
Can we take a side quest for a bit? Why do you feel like there's such a high turnover rate in the industry when it comes to clinicians or the people who are delivering care?
Sure. There's just no denying that this is an intensive industry to work in. People come for a million different reasons, a lot of them, though, because of their own personal journey. It is highly emotional. It is intense working with a client face to face. You leave your heart and soul at work when you go home at the end of the day. And unfortunately, we also carry with us the baggage that we've picked up from the clients. And so there needs to be a lot of work done to make sure that you can have some separation there and that you can take care of yourself. So that's one element of it. I also think that we are in kind of a new era of behavioral health care where profits are really forefront, and we are working really diligently to make sure that we're optimizing everyone's productivity and that we are asking the most of our teams. And it's a really difficult grind for a lot of individuals. They are challenged with an emotionally charged environment at work, and they have to show up as their best self every day. It's incredibly taxing on a personal level. I think that we have interesting hours in our facilities, so we ask people to work challenging shifts. There is often kind of entry-level pay and maybe not a real clear path to career advancement, and it creates burnout. And burnout is a significant issue in our industry and one that we're wrestling with as leaders to find ways to mitigate.
How do you, at the Haven and with the organizations that you've worked with, how do you combat that? What have you done as a CEO that you feel like helps reverse those trends?
Yeah. This is my personal passion. My professional mission is to make sure that people have professional development opportunities, that we're creating culture that drives engagement and ownership, that we are honoring the work that our teams do in a variety of different ways. And so I am all about digging in and creating culture that recognizes the incredible work that we do. Every day we suit up and show up, and our teams are literally changing lives for another human being. And so there is not enough appreciation for our teams. There is not enough honor that we can share for the work that they do.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it has to do with when I was a teacher, it was the same kind of thing. It's like people expect that just because the work is meaningful, that we shouldn't be compensated or that we shouldn't have our work-life balance in order or that we shouldn't be supported, right? But clinical teams need all of those things and more. You're dealing with people often at their worst, often at their most challenging times of their life. And we can't separate our work self from our home self as easily. It's not something that humans are meant to do. It kind of bleeds into each other, and it can be a real challenge. Coming back to differentiation, it seems like one of the themes that you're talking about is making the staff and the team who's treating people the heroes of the story, right? The all-stars of this. The people that you really want to market are those clinical staff. And it becomes challenging because if I create a bunch of content around these people, or if I write up a detailed profile of them, or we do a video and then that person leaves, then that content doesn't work anymore, right? But it sounds like what you're saying is, okay, we'll invest in your staff. Invest in honoring them, invest in supporting them, helping them have that work-life balance, recognizing the challenges, and giving them the support that they need to be able to do their best work and show up and be their best selves. Am I missing anything?
No, that's absolutely correct. Oftentimes I see our frontline staff and our entry-level workforce being taken advantage of for just the reason you enumerated. So they come with a personal mission. They're really passionate about giving back, about making a difference, about reaching one hand out to, someone who's still struggling. And because they're passionate, they come in hot. Leadership sees, oh, we've got, a great worker here willing to do anything. And then we plug them into working nights and weekends, or we ask them to pick up extra shifts. We put a lot of work on them on the front end, and it's really challenging and it burns them out quickly. I think that's one of the reasons that we see a lot of people leave within the first 6 months of working in a treatment center. It is not what they expected, and it becomes really challenging to keep up that pace and that passion if they're not rewarded in some way. It's generally not money that is a motivator in this industry. We really want to see positive outcomes, and that fills us in a way that money and financial gain doesn't, or might in another industry. And so we have to find new ways to motivate and engage our teams, creating ownership for them and helping them feel like they really are part of the solution.
I love that. I think all of those things, it's not just money. It's not just having some autonomy and decision-making. It's not just having external validation. It's kind of like all of those things. We need all of those things in the way that we support our staff. So you've led a lot of programs with deep clinical roots. What are some examples of authentic differentiation that you've seen or that you've built yourself?
Yeah, I have. I've been so fortunate to work with some incredible clinical teams. And I'm not a clinician myself, so I didn't come to the industry that way. As you know, I came as a client. And so, the people who made a difference in my world were the ones who really showed up in the most authentic way. And I continue to support that with the clinical teams. What I really love is if we have a clinician who has a particular specialty or something that they love doing, if they bring their most passionate, authentic self to work every morning, let's support that and see what they can do. So if they have an idea for a new group therapy, if they have an idea for a new way to engage a patient, I'm going to support that all day long. Obviously working with our clinical directors and our clinical leaders, but I want to make sure that people are doing what brings them joy, and then it will allow them to share that with the clients that we're treating. I've worked with teams who have, long CVs, who've been in the industry for years and years, who have excellent experience and education, but nothing tops the passion that you bring. And so if you can come to the table with, your own personal, experiential offering, I think you just can't beat that.
Yeah. Can you give me an example of what that might look like and how you would communicate that? Right. Because I think we all know those clinicians, those people who are changing people's lives and are just a real light within the center. How do you translate that into a differentiation? Do you have like a specific example?
I do. When I was at Casa Palmera in San Diego years ago, we had so many amazing clinicians there, one of whom was specializing in trauma-focused care. And she was so passionate about it. And she could be difficult to work with because she refused to do any other groups, only wanted to work with clients who needed her particular care. And so it was really interesting because it was a double-edged sword. Yes, she could be difficult in terms of scheduling and working within the team structure. However, when she worked with clients, it was game on. They left with magic in their eyes because of the work that she was doing with them. I would have rearranged the world to make sure that she had time with those patients because she was so good at what she did. And so I think allowing and paving a path for clinicians to do what they do really, really well is one of the ways that we can support clinical excellence in our teams.
And that's how you kind of did it internally. How did you translate that into the way that you talked about the center?
Sure. I mean, I would talk about her. I would talk about the impact that she had had on clients' lives. I would talk about the difference that she was making in our outcomes measurements, how she was individually called out on, post-discharge surveys. I would talk about having a stable of therapists who were each as passionately focused on their area of specification as she was. And so everyone wants to hear what's special about your organization. When you can talk about special humans, it doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah. So we always tend to think about these things like small client to staff ratio or evidence-based therapies. But what are the folks' names? And what are the stories of change that you've seen? And how are you telling those stories? I think that one of the things you're kind of doing is you're elevating the clinicians as the heroes. And you're not just saying our clinicians, you're using their name and you're saying specific examples of how they showed up and made a change in people's lives. Am I getting that right?
100%. The only thing I want to make sure that we don't leave out, it's not just clinicians. It's the behavioral techs who are on the floor doing rounds, overnight shifts, making sure that everyone is safe. It's the chef in the kitchen who's deciding on the menu plan for the month. It's the cooks who are delivering meals to the patients. It's the drivers who are transporting all day long. It is the admissions people picking up the phone. It is the entire team. And it's creating a culture for the entire team of ownership and engagement and making sure that they're properly rewarded, but also properly recognized when we're telling the story, because we are truly a team. It is not just the clinicians. It is not just leadership. It is everyone who contributes to the healing of another human being who needs to get recognized. And I think when we tell a story about an organization that runs like that, then we create differentiation.
Yeah. In behavioral health, we talk about biopsychosocial care, right? If you're trying to find the best treatment possible, it's going to have an element of biopsychosocial care. Biologically, they're going to do everything in the physical capacity to be able to make sure that you're okay. Sometimes that's medication-assisted treatment. Other times that means a BHT is able to get you a snack when you're feeling hungry, right? Or able to make sure that you have an eye mask so that you can sleep well if you're in a detox environment. It's these little things, right? And then we've already talked about the psychological side, right? The expertise within clinical care, being able to help change the way that we think about things. And then there's the social part. How do all of those things interact, from the person on the admissions line who's able to help you unpack the different levels of care because no one's probably had to learn that, or the insurance hurdles that come along with that, and paying for treatment and communicating on the front end. So you're right. When you do that, it creates a much different experience, right? To where we're elevating everybody. But if somebody comes to you and says, hey, how is the Haven different? What are the ways that you tell them that you differentiate your services?
Sure. I mean, the primary differentiator is that we treat college students who are engaged currently in studies. So we want to make sure that they don't have to choose between their collegiate career and their mental health.
Mm.
The students that we're seeing are committed to completing their collegiate career, and they often have come away from home into a new environment. They are facing intense pressure to succeed. They oftentimes have come from an environment where it's been very supportive. They've had families and other support systems to make sure that they're successful in entering into these colleges. And then they find themselves alone and challenged by the environment, challenged by the temptations, and struggling with an entirely new environment.
So the key differentiation is that you work with college students. It means that you have to have a more flexible schedule. It informs the way that you show up clinically and the therapeutic modalities that you offer and the hours that you offer them at, right? All of those things. What do you tell people when they say, I don't want to niche down? Because if I niche down, I'm going to be limiting the amount of ways that I can impact folks. What do you tell people as a brand that has niched down that said, hey, these are the folks we want to go after?
It's so interesting, that terminology, niche down. I actually think that we have just stayed steadily niche. The organization was started many years ago with a college student in mind. And I think we've stayed there because it's where we create a difference. We in this industry now are trying to be all things to everybody. I can't tell you how many organizations I come across who are literally trying on every different element of the treatment protocol to see what fits for them. They're going to try eating disorders. They're going to try substance abuse. They're going to try mental health. They're going to try different niche populations. And the reality is that what we need to do is lean into where we are needed and where we find success. So for college kids, you're right. They need flexible scheduling. They need practitioners who totally understand what they're going through. They need us to be accommodating of the particular challenges that they have in collegiate life. And so being present for that very specific need creates differentiation for us that I think when you cast your net widely, you struggle then to find what it is that you do really well. And then the people who are seeking care are going to have a hard time understanding what it is that you do really well. You simply look vanilla to the consumer.
I mean, so much gold in what you're saying. We think that if we say on our website or in our marketing materials, if we can just include everything, then we will get the masses and people will come and find us. And it actually has the opposite effect. When you stand for nothing in particular, you also gain nothing. In order to go in a direction, you have to choose to go against another direction. Can't be walking in two directions at the same time, if that metaphor checks out or makes sense. And so what you're saying is in order for you guys to be able to fulfill your service, you had to say, hey, here's the problem that we want to solve. You started with the problem, the thing that you wanted to solve, and then you made everything in the process fit around that problem. You said, what would be the ideal way that someone in college who's struggling with mental health or addiction could find care? Well, it'd probably have to work around their schedule, and it'd probably need people who understood the college experience, and you'd need some therapeutic modalities that could meet people where they're at and could have tangible impact for them to be able to juggle multiple competing priorities. And that's what you've done. And it came through having a specific goal in mind. So you've mentioned the disconnect between marketing and clinical teams. How does that gap hurt an organization's ability to deliver on its promises?
I think the very obvious challenge is that if we have marketing out there, whether it's digital or we have outreach representatives out in the field talking about something that we offer, a clinical service that we provide, a clinical philosophy that doesn't resonate within our own clinical team, there's a real disconnect there. And I see that more often than not, sadly. Something that's been really important to me over the years, and I've actually done battle with marketing directors over this before, but having interdisciplinary team meetings and regular communication, having a chat line so that we can all be in communication regularly. I think it's super important for our clinical team to understand what's being said about the care that they're providing out in the world so that there's an alignment there. I also think it's really important for our marketing arm to be immersed in the clinical product so that they can understand what it is that we're truly doing on a day-to-day. So come sit in on the groups, come sit with the clinical director, have them explain what the clinical philosophy is, explore what we truly are offering so that we can then represent it in the most beneficial light. Making sure that we have, true fidelity to what we say we do is probably the most authentic thing we can do in marketing our programs.
There's a tricky balance that marketing has to go through with clinical, in that you want to provide enough information on your marketing materials, on your website, so that somebody has a really good understanding of what they're getting themselves into. And at the same time, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself down into something like a schedule that can be subject to change, or anything that could get in the way of somebody being able to take a next step. Right. So schedule is a good example. If they see something on the schedule and they're like, I could never do this, then they choose not to call. Right. How do you strike that balance between being authentic and like saying what you do and doing what you say between the marketing and clinical team, but not giving so much information that it's overwhelming for somebody and they're not able to take a next step because they're kind of in information overload?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I really do think it goes back to focusing on and elevating your team. So doing a significant bio on each of your team members, whether that's clinical or in some area of operations, then what you're getting is a focus on specialty, a focus on practice, a focus on program, but not on the specifics of the day-to-day. You get a sense of, why the chef does what the chef does. And clearly you can see that they're passionate about delivering healthy food that's going to help you heal. You'll get a good sense of what the transport driver brings to the table in terms of humor and good nature. And you're going to get a sense of what that tech on the floor is interested in. So maybe you'll find a companion who shares some sensibility, sharing a schedule with them, which they can easily eliminate as being not appropriate for them. We're looking again to build connection. And I think the human to human connection is the most powerful thing we can bring to the table.
Right, right. Maybe instead of trying to explain what a single case agreement is on your website, saying that we have insurance advocates who help you navigate that hurdle and will work with you and your insurance to figure out the right level of care and where you can get it, right? So it's talking to each of those folks and understanding how they contribute to the overall treatment process. I want to say a video is a great example of this. It's a great way to be able to communicate that. It's harder to do in text, but if you do have a video in which you're able to interview BHTs, people on the admissions team, and somebody who's been there for a minute and say, hey, how do you help people in their treatment process? You have a really good collection of a timeline from the beginning of somebody in that contemplative stage to even the discharge planner or the person who's in charge of figuring out, how do I get connected with an alumni group or support group? Or am I going to step down into outpatient care, general outpatient care, and finding another therapist? Having different people along those different places tell how they contribute to that can be a really powerful way. And something we know from recovery.com is that people are watching video more than ever, that people want to hear and see the people who are delivering care and how it's showing up. And video is going to be a really powerful way to do that. That's not going to take up a ton of space on your website. For those of you who are following along, ask yourself, do I have a video that highlights the key members on my team, clinicians, admissions folk, BHTs, all of those people along in that journey where they have a chance to be able to say this? Just 2 to 3 minutes, pulling out the biggest clips, the most impactful things that they can do. But it can do a lot of legwork in telling the story of what it would be like to go to treatment. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I love it. Again, it's about the human connection. And I think you can't do that any more powerfully than with a video. The next best thing to meeting in person. So I absolutely love that.
So how can leadership and team development play a role in creating a truly differentiated treatment experience?
Yeah, this is my passion point. So I really believe that as leaders, we are tasked with creating a vision and giving people the resources to help that vision become reality. It's up to us to create a culture that empowers and creates ownership and invites our teams to be the very best that they can be. And if we can't do that, I think we really ought to step out of the way. It's really important for us to create cultures that promote healing, I think that we get sidetracked with KPIs and profitability and the spreadsheets. And what we really need to do is look internally at the humans who drive this progress and recognize them for the great work that they're doing and help them create ownership of those KPIs, help them create ownership of the profitability, help them see the value that they bring. And that immediately creates a culture then that is sticky, that is resilient, that is able to create true healing in the world. Is really to be able to give people the resources that they need to be successful. I'm not a clinician. I'm not a tech. I couldn't do what they do, honestly.
Yeah.
But what I can do is make sure that they are all coming together as a team and sharing their experience, hope, and strengths so that we can keep moving forward and sharing that with another client.
Yeah, I hear the recovery language.
Oh, yeah. I threw that in there, didn't I?
Yeah. You're in recovery.
I am.
It's something that matters to you. It obviously informs the work that you do. How does being a CEO and being in recovery lend to the differentiation that you hope to bring into the space?
It's a great question. I never set out to be a CEO in behavioral health. My education is in something wildly different. And when I was in treatment, I had people in my cohort who wanted nothing more than to be counselors and therapists. And so they went off to school to do that. And frankly, I couldn't think of anything worse. Like that just sounded awful to me. But I knew a little bit about business and I had a really immense passion to make sure that treatment resources were available for anyone who is seeking them. And so the passion that I bring from my own treatment experience, it has guided a lot of the decision making in my career. I can put myself in the client's shoes because I was one. I can sit with a client and have a connection because I'm not the CEO in the corner office. I have a connection with our staff and our team because I appreciate them so much for what they did. Not only are they giving back the clients' lives who they're working with, but they gave me back my life. I told you I cry easily and I get really emotional about this particular part of the work that I do. I think that we as leaders need to show up as humble as our clients do when they make the decision to come to care. We need to remain teachable and humble and appreciative. And I see great leaders doing that in our industry, and I give them tremendous props. I think my own personal recovery, while it's not something that I necessarily wear on my sleeve, I'm super open about it if asked. The work that I do feeds my recovery on a daily basis. My recovery also feeds the work that I do on a daily basis. They don't go singularly. They're always together.
It's so well said. The thing that you made me think about is with my own team, right? When we're creating content and we're doing things like this podcast, so much of the thing that I'm thinking about is asking my team, what do you need? Everybody wants to do their job well, right? Everybody wants to go home and feel like they're making a difference, that they're having an impact, that they're helping people in some way, shape, or form. And there are things that get in the way of that. There's things with their schedule. There's things with processes. There's things with pay. There's things with titles even. And all of those things really matter to the people who are doing the work. And so much of my job is really just understanding what are the bottlenecks and how can I support? And when we do take that approach, when we're able to take a step back and look at our team and say, actually, what do you need? And then deliver on those things time after time, that trust is built up. They're going to stay longer. They're going to be happier. And the end result of the work is also going to be better. The KPIs will change. The numbers will move because we're investing in the people and that we're listening to them and we're thinking about them over. I hate that word human resource because we think of humans as a resource, but the humans are just humans. And it's our job as leaders to be able to support them in their work, right? I have one final question for you coming into the home stretch here. Looking ahead, so, as you gaze out into the behavioral health landscape, where do you see the greatest hope or opportunity for treatment centers to break out of this sameness and do something meaningful?
I love that. Most treatment centers are doing something really meaningful, right? I think marketing it as such is a whole different conversation. And so creating differentiation by elevating the differentiation, by elevating the uniqueness is what we need to focus on. Leaning into what you do really well. For the Haven, again, it's college students. It's such a tiny, narrow niche, but we do it really well. We know who we're treating and we can speak their language and show up for them in the way that they need us to. So I do think that getting very focused on what you're good at is the key to differentiating and creating success for those that you're caring for. Be really confident about what it is that you're doing. Really own the differentiation that's being made in your center and speak loudly about it. Market it solely as opposed to trying to be all things to everyone. I think I shared with you a story. I was looking at a website the other day. It was supposed to be a luxury treatment experience. And I had a friend who was sending an older female friend to be a client of this place. And she just wanted me to check out the website and see what I thought. And I reviewed it. And my first thought was there are pictures of 22-year-olds all over this website. It's a very young cohort that they're showing. So my immediate thought is this is a young group. That's who they're specializing in. And then I started reading the text and they literally had bullet lists of differentiating factors. And one of the differentiating factors was that they had an on-site laundry. It really brought me up, stopped me cold, because if that's what we're calling out as a differentiation these days, that's really challenging to me. That is not a differentiation. That should just be a part of your treatment experience. And so I think if we can get more creative, more thoughtful, look inward to see what it is that we're really good at and what defines us as teams, as treatment providers, then let's highlight that. Let's not highlight the washer and dryer on site. Let's highlight, the clinician who's focused on trauma care, who refuses to do anything but because they know that their differentiation is going to make the difference in someone's life.
Yeah, a few closing thoughts for myself coming from the marketing perspective. If you've ever gone to Cheesecake Factory or any other restaurant that has a giant menu, then you know that you're going to get a different quality of food than if you go to a place and they only serve 3 things. Or if you go to a Michelin restaurant and you don't even get to order, they're just going to bring you what they're making today. It's because there's a level of specificity that comes through that can only be expressed through not having everything, right? Through being intentional about the choices that you make and what you omit. And so I would say that restaurant that focuses on 5 menu items and is the best at those is also going to stand head and shoulders apart over somebody who's trying to be everything to everyone. My second thing is that I would say is if every single person on your leadership team, and I would even say this coming back down to the clinical staff, cannot off the top of their head name 3 to 5 things that differentiate you from your competitors or other treatment centers, then you're doing something wrong, right? Then there is a miscommunication and an alignment in values. That's a marketing problem. That's because it hasn't been expressed from the top down enough. It needs to be the same song. It needs to be in harmony with everyone so that everybody's saying the same thing. If everyone is saying something different, you get a really confusing story. But if everybody in your team is harmonizing with each other and we're all singing the same song, it becomes a really powerful thing. And it also becomes more memorable, right? It's easier to get stuck in your head. I still, to this day, know all 6 differentiating factors when I worked at Sandstone Care because it was something that we really tried to drill down and tried to communicate over and over and over again on every single page of our website and all of the marketing materials. In the way that business development folks would hit each of those points when they're touring a center. And by the time they had gone from admissions team to being in treatment, they had heard it multiple times or seen it multiple times. And then it's up to the team to actually deliver on those things, right? So I would say those are some few things. Don't be scared of going into a specific thing. Make sure that you and everyone on your staff can say off the top of their head what those differentiating factors are. And if you do that, then you will find your people, or maybe your people will find you. Jen, thanks for joining us on the podcast. Where can people go to learn more about you and the work that you do?
www.thehavenatcollege.com. can't wait to talk more about the Haven.
And you're also on LinkedIn, I believe.
Of course.
Yes. You're also on LinkedIn if you want to hit her up and make a connection. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your time, and really the work that you do in providing excellent care to a population that really needs it. Listeners, watchers, if you want to learn more, you can find all of the links of the things that we've talked about in the show notes and the description box of this podcast, including a link to the blog post that summarizes the key highlights that have been talked about. Thank you so much. Remember, the better your marketing, the more people you can help. We'll see you on the next episode.